Islam spread very, very fast in the 7th century, and Muslim expansion was a phenomenon. Many historians talked about it, and many medieval authors writing on Islam, and later on in the early modern period, as late as the 19th century, were claiming that Islam was spread by the sword. Right? This notion was widely spread throughout European territories, and also later on during the colonial period, this thought or this perception was resurrected. While this was happening, many colonial scholars were writing books on this topic and claiming that Islam was spread by the sword. There was a British author, a philosopher named Professor Thomas Walker Arnold. Professor Arnold was teaching in India. He was a philosopher, and he had come across this Orientalist narrative on Islamic history. So he decided that he will go and conduct some research and find responses to this narrative, because he had come across some information which wasn't in favor of that particular narrative, that Islam was spread by the sword. And the result of his efforts was this book, The Preaching of Islam, a very, very important book by Professor Thomas Arnold. You can see it is an old book. It is from the 19th century, published in 1896. And this is the first edition. Why do I show you this book? This is to highlight the fact that there are non-Muslim historians who have written on the expansion, the spread of Islam in the 7th century and beyond. And they have shown through research, through facts, that Islam was not spread by the sword. Rather, it was actually a very good force for human history. A civilization of a grand scale was created in places like Spain, in North Africa, in places like Iraq and beyond. So Professor Thomas Arnold in this very, very extensive book talks about how Muslims went around taking the land of Persia, taking the land of Syria, and why they did this and why were they successful. He claims that one of the reasons Muslims were successful was because of the support they received from the masses in these lands. The masses of very oppressed and the ruling powers at the time in these lands, like in Persia, the Sassanid Empire, and in the Byzantine territory, the Romans or the Byzantines were very oppressive against the masses. The details are far too long for me to discuss, but let's get to the book. This is a very important book, although written quite a while back, but still the information is very much valid. Historians have written about this information. It is scattered all over books, in different books, but this is one volume where you can read the history of the expansion of Islam as far as information is concerned, right? Of course, it's not as academically, how can I put it, updated as works are today. This is more than 100 years old, this book, and I strongly recommend the second edition, which was published in 1913, because it was expanded. The second edition, 1913 edition, was expanded. Professor Thomas Arnold was very sympathetic to Islam. In fact, he is known to be one of the teachers of the famous poet of the East, Muhammad Iqbal, who was a poet from the Indian subcontinent, one of the founding fathers of Pakistan. Arnold was one of his teachers. He taught him philosophy in India, and then he encouraged him to study at Cambridge in Britain. So Professor Thomas Arnold had friends like Muslim scholars such as Shibli Nomani, rahmatullahi alayh, and others.